There are books that teach you something, and there are books that change you. And then there is man's search for meaning, a book not written from comfort or curiosity or imagination, but from the edge of human suffering. From inside one of the darkest places humans have ever built, a Nazi concentration camp. A place where hope went to die, yet somehow hope survived. And the man who carried that hope was Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist, a prisoner, a survivor, and the author of one of the most important books in human history. But before this becomes a story about pain, let me tell you something. This is not a book about the Holocaust. It is a book about the human spirit, about the invisible strength inside us that appears only when everything else is taken away. It's a book about meaning, and why meaning is the one thing humans cannot live without. Imagine, my friend, you have a family, a career, dreams, a future, and in a single moment, everything is taken away. You're stripped of your name, your clothes, your identity, and left with a number tattooed on your arm. Viktor Frankl entered Auschwitz not as a doctor, not as a writer, not as a scholar, but as prisoner 119104. He saw people beaten, starved, humiliated, executed, often for nothing. He saw friends break. He saw strong men collapse. He saw gentle people turn cruel. And yet, he also saw something else. He saw a few people, not many, but a few, who kept a reason to live, burning quietly inside them. A memory, a belief, a purpose, a person they loved, a future they imagined, a meaning they refused to let go of. And he realized something profound. Suffering destroys you only when you believe it has no meaning. Frankl wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." In a place where food was scarce and death was everywhere, he discovered a truth far bigger than psychology. Humans can survive almost any how if they have a strong enough why. Meaning, he realized, is not luxury, it is survival. Meaning is oxygen for the soul. You may not be in a concentration camp, but you know suffering. You know loneliness, fear, failure, disappointment, heartbreak, trauma, dark nights with no answers. Everyone carries their own pain, their own inner Auschwitz. Frankl's book speaks to that part of you. The part that asks, why am I here? What does my suffering mean? What should I do with my life? How do I keep going when everything feels heavy? This book is not a history lesson. It is a mirror, a guide, a quiet voice saying, there is meaning in your life, and you must find it, not for comfort, but for survival. In this long-form journey, you and I will walk with Viktor Frankl through the darkest corners of his experience and the brightest insights of his psychology. We'll explore why suffering can shape purpose, why meaning is more powerful than pleasure or success, why people break under despair, and why some rise above it, how your mindset can save you, and the 3 ways Frankl says meaning is found. We'll blend psychology, history, real stories, modern research, philosophy, and your own lived experiences to understand what Frankl understood, that humans are not destroyed by pain, but by meaninglessness. And meaning is something you can create, even in the darkest night. Now, let's begin the journey. Take a breath, my friend. Settle your mind. Let's step into the story of a man who walked through hell and came out holding a truth the world desperately needed to hear. This is man's search for meaning. And you are listening to Wise Alchemy. There are moments in history where the world does not end with fire, but with silence. No explosions, no warnings, just a cold morning, a train screeching to a stop, and the sound of hundreds of prisoners breathing the same frozen air as the doors slide open. This is where Viktor Frankl's story begins. Not in a classroom, not in a hospital, not in front of a lecture hall, but inside a cattle car, packed so tightly that people couldn't sit down for days. The smell of sweat, fear, and the unknown mixing into one heavy fog of dread. And yet, the weather outside was strangely calm. Today's weather is calm, Frankl would later write, as if the sky had no idea where we had arrived. He steps off the train, feet trembling from exhaustion, breath sharp in the cold morning air. Around him, men, women, children, all silent, all dazed, all waiting for instructions that would never come. Guards shouting, dogs barking, smoke rising from distant chimneys, the metallic taste in the air. Frankl watches all of this, not as a doctor, not as a thinker, but as a human being trying to understand how quickly a life can unravel. He would later say, "In a single moment, I lost my family, my home, my future, and even my name. Because at Auschwitz, you are no longer a person. You are a number." Viktor Frankl became 119104, and his first lesson was brutal. When everything is taken from you, what remains is your inner world. The prisoners are ordered into lines. Frankl doesn't understand what's happening. No one does. A man stands ahead, pointing left or right with a quiet flick of his finger. Left, right, left, right. There is no explanation. A man with a limp is sent left. A mother holding her baby, left. A teenager coughing, left. An old man, left. A strong-looking worker, right. Frankl watches closely. He notices patterns. He sees something unspoken. Left means death. Right means work. A single finger gesture decides the rest of your existence. Frankl is sent right. He stays alive, for now. But he doesn't know that his father, mother, brother, and pregnant wife have already been sent left, never to return. This moment becomes a wound he carries forever. The wound that becomes a philosophy. New prisoners are pushed into a room. Clothes off, hair shaved, belongings confiscated, wedding rings removed, photographs burned, names erased. Frankl watches a man try to hide a family picture in his shoe. A guard catches him. The photo is thrown into the fire. The man collapses. Frankl doesn't cry. He can't. He is observing, quietly, clinically, painfully. He realizes the truth. The first step to breaking a human is removing every symbol of who they used to be. Not the body, the identity. That night, in a freezing wooden barracks with no windows and barely any space to lie down, Frankl lies awake. Around him, a man sobbing quietly, another whispering a prayer, someone shaking from fever, someone staring blankly at the ceiling, someone muttering their child's name, someone already giving up. Frankl listens to the breathing, the trembling, the despair. But instead of collapsing, he observes, he studies. He tries to understand what makes some men break instantly while others hold on. And he sees a pattern. People without a reason to live collapse first. People who think, I will never see my wife again. I will die here. It's over. These men fade quickly. But others, those who whisper, I must survive to tell the world. I must return to my children. I must finish my work. I must prove something to myself. These men somehow endure. Frankl has a realization so powerful, it will become the foundation of his life's work. Meaning keeps people alive. Meaning is stronger than suffering. Meaning is survival. On the third day, Frankl witnesses something that changes him. A prisoner collapses while marching. A guard approaches to beat him. But another prisoner, exhausted, hungry, freezing, quietly lifts the man to his feet, holding him up with trembling arms. He risks punishment. He risks death. But he still chooses compassion. Frankl is stunned. In a place where cruelty dominates, this small act is a spark of light in an ocean of darkness. He understands. Even in the worst hell, humans still have the freedom to choose who they become. This becomes his ultimate truth. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our growth and our meaning. Even in Auschwitz, meaning can survive. Frankl realizes something almost spiritual. The camp can imprison your body, but it cannot imprison your mind unless you allow it. The guards can take your clothes, your home, your name, your family, but they cannot take how you respond. This realization is not hope. It is defiance, a quiet, inner rebellion. And with that, the seeds of Frankl's philosophy begin to grow. The philosophy that will one day change millions of lives. My friend, pain does strange things to the human mind. It doesn't just hurt. It reshapes, it rewrites, it reorganizes everything you thought you understood about yourself. In Auschwitz, Viktor Frankl learned that suffering is not a physical experience. It is a psychological transformation. A breaking, or a bending, or, in rare cases, a quiet strengthening. Let's walk into that psychological landscape. Frankl observed that every prisoner goes through three inner stages. The first is shock. Not emotional shock, biological shock. The body freezes. The mind refuses to understand. Thoughts become blurry, like trying to read a book underwater. Frankl described it as a curious coldness, a detachment from one's own situation. He remembers the moment a man was whipped beside him for walking too slowly. Frankl didn't scream. He didn't react. He didn't even feel horror. He felt nothing. This was not numbness. It was survival. The mind protects itself by shutting down emotions to conserve energy. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Extreme stress activates the dorsal vagal response, a freeze state designed to keep us alive when fight and flight are impossible. Frankl didn't know the biology, but he saw the pattern. When the world becomes unbearable, the mind stops feeling to survive. In the first days, the camp felt like another planet. Everything that mattered outside the fences, birthdays, money, friendships, reputation, comfort, even good manners, vanished instantly. Frankl noticed that the human mind adjusts to horror far faster than anyone wants to admit. He wrote, "We became accustomed to the impossible." He tells the story of seeing a man steal another prisoner's bread. No one tried to stop him. No one yelled. People simply accepted it. Not because they were cruel, but because survival overpowered morality. This is what psychologists today call moral injury, when suffering forces you to act against your values. Frankl realized the camp was not just a physical prison. It was a psychological laboratory where the human mind was pushed to its breaking point. In every barrack, Frankl saw a tragic pattern. Before a prisoner's body died, their spirit died first. He could recognize the signs. The eyes stop searching. The back stops straightening. The voice becomes flat. The small rituals stop. The man no longer cares about survival. Frankl called this the death of the inner life. Modern psychology calls it pythodical surrender. When a person believes, "I have nothing left to live for," the body follows quickly. Frankl observed men who would lie down in the snow and say, "I'm done." No beating, no shouting, no pleading could bring them back. But here's the profound thing. The body didn't give up first. The meaning did. And that is when Frankl understood. Suffering becomes unbearable only when it has no meaning. This realization shaped everything he later taught the world. Even in the darkest suffering, the mind desperately looks for a reason to continue. Frankl saw this again and again. One man whispered every night, "I must survive to see my wife again." Another said, "I promised my son I'd return." Another, "I must finish my book." These were not fantasies. They were lifelines. Neuroscientists today call this the future self anchor, the brain's ability to endure pain by visualizing a meaningful future. Patients in modern hospitals who have a future-oriented goal recover faster. Prisoners with purpose survive longer. Humans with meaning live stronger. Meaning is not decoration, it is biology. Frankl noticed something strange. The men who focused only on survival, only on food, only on avoiding punishment, often broke the fastest. But the men who still found tiny reasons to be human lasted longer. Someone sharing a sip of soup, someone comforting a younger prisoner, someone giving away a piece of bread even though they were starving. Paradoxical, right? You would think selfishness would increase survival. But compassion was a psychological armor. Meaning came from caring for someone other than yourself. Frankl said, those who had a why to live could bear almost any how. Suffering became a test not of strength, but of purpose. There was one night Frankl almost lost his own meaning. He thought about his wife and wondered if she was still alive. He didn't know. He would never know. The uncertainty tormented him. He sat in the dark barrack, hands shaking, mind spiraling. And then he realized, even if she was gone, his love for her remained a reason to survive. Meaning did not depend on outcome. Meaning depended on choice. He whispered to himself, I will live for her, whether she is alive or not. That decision saved him. Frankl understood a truth that many never learn. Suffering is not what destroys us. Meaninglessness destroys us. Pain without purpose becomes a prison. Pain with purpose becomes endurance. He saw that the mind is not built to avoid suffering, but to transform it. The camp stripped people to their core, and what remained was the pure, unfiltered truth of human psychology. The soul survives where the body should not, and meaning is the oxygen that keeps the soul alive. There comes a moment when suffering stops feeling extraordinary and becomes normal. And that, Viktor Frankl said, is one of the most dangerous transformations of all. Life in a concentration camp didn't break people in the dramatic ways movies like to show. It broke them slowly, hour by hour, habit by habit, until the impossible became routine. Let's step quietly into that routine. The camp day began long before sunrise, not with alarms, not with bells, but with shouting, the stomping of boots, and the cold. Always the cold. Frankl wrote, the morning began not with waking, but with remembering where we were. Imagine opening your eyes to darkness and the weight of another man sleeping half on top of you because of the cramped bunks. Imagine feeling your body already exhausted before even standing up. Imagine knowing that whatever pain you felt now was only a preview of what the next hours would bring. That was morning in Auschwitz. No breakfast, just a swallow of watery coffee that tasted like burnt regret. And then, work. Prisoners marched in thin shoes, through snow, through mud, through frozen wind that sliced through skin like knives. But it wasn't the labor that broke them. It was the pointlessness of it. Frankl saw men ordered to move a pile of stones from one place to another, only to be told to move it back again. Tasks that served no purpose except one: to crush the human spirit. Modern psychologists call this learned helplessness. When you're forced to repeat meaningless suffering, the brain learns that nothing you do matters. And once a person believes that, strength evaporates. But Frankl resisted this mentally. He told himself, "They control my body, not my mind." That sentence became a shield. In everyday life, everyone has an identity, a job, a personality, a name, preferences, habits, humor, style, dreams. But in the camp, these things dissolved. Frankl saw doctors working beside farmers, teachers beside criminals, musicians beside accountants. Titles didn't matter, only survival did. One night, Frankl overheard two men arguing. "Do you know who I used to be?" one man said, and the other replied, "Does it matter now?" That sentence summarized the entire camp experience. A whole life reduced to hunger, cold, exhaustion, and the faint hope that tomorrow might not be worse. The camp didn't just remove freedom, it removed identity. Frankl said hunger was not a sensation, but a religion. It occupied the mind completely. Prisoners talked about food the way poets talk about love. Someone would whisper, "What was your favorite meal before the camp?" And men would close their eyes and describe bread, soup, warm tea, as if describing heaven. Frankl noted, hunger erased every intellectual interest except the search for meaning. Hunger pushed the body to desperation, but it also forced the mind to face its deepest truths. And in that raw state, Frankl observed the human soul not as a psychiatrist, but as a fellow sufferer. Even in hell, some men found rituals that kept a sliver of humanity alive. One man tied his shoes in the same knot every morning. Another straightened his shirt, even though it was torn. Another smoothed his hair, even though it was shaved. Another whispered poetry under his breath. These rituals were ridiculous from the outside, but internally they served one purpose: to remind the prisoner that he was still a person, not an object. Frankl's own ritual was to imagine his wife, her smile, her voice, her hand in his. He later discovered she had died in the camps, but the memory of loving her had kept him alive. Meaning does not need to be real in the physical world. Meaning needs to be real in the mind. After weeks in the camp, something shifts. Tears stop coming. Fear fades. Shock dulls. Not because things get better, but because the human psyche shuts down emotional reactions to survive. Frankl called it the apathy of the protected mind. He remembered walking past a man lying in the mud, barely breathing, and feeling nothing. No sadness, no horror, only emptiness. This was not cruelty. This was trauma's defense mechanism. Psychologists today recognize this as emotional numbing, the mind's final shield against collapse. But even in that numbness, Frankl found a quiet insight. If suffering can erase emotions, then meaning must restore them. Meaning became the antidote to numbness. Frankl learned unwritten rules that determined life or death. Don't stand out. Don't argue. Don't walk too fast. Guards get suspicious. Don't walk too slow. Guards get angry. Don't show weakness. Don't show too much strength. Share, but not too much. Trust, but carefully. Life became a delicate balance between invisibility and endurance. He realized survival was not about strength, it was about adaptation. And adaptation was psychological, not physical. Frankl wrote, "The camp was not one great hell. It was millions of tiny hells repeated every day. What killed people fastest was not the cold or the hunger or the labor. It was the disappearance of meaning, identity, and humanity. Life in the camp was the death of normalcy. And yet within that collapse, Frankl found a seed, a spark, a truth. The human mind can adapt to unimaginable suffering, but it must cling to a purpose to stay alive. And that purpose was the only thing the Nazis could never steal." A question that haunted Viktor Frankl every single day he spent in the camps. Why do some people survive when others, often stronger, healthier, younger, do not? Because survival wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It wasn't strength. It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't even health. Frankl realized something shocking. The people who lived longest were the ones who carried a why. Not a muscle, not a skill, a meaning. Let's explore this truth through Frankl's eyes. In the camp, Frankl saw strong men collapse in their first week. In the camp, Frankl saw strong men collapse in their first week. In the camp, Frankl saw strong men collapse in their first week. In the camp, Frankl saw strong men collapse in their first week. And fragile men survive for months. He noticed something strange. The physically strongest prisoners often died first, because they relied on their body for identity, and the camp shattered bodies quickly. But the ones who survived longer were often quiet, thoughtful, emotionally grounded, deeply connected to an inner purpose. They had a reason to stay alive, something to return to, someone to love, something unfinished, a belief they refused to abandon. Meaning was the hidden fuel. Frankl said, the prisoner who had lost faith in the future was doomed, not because he lacked strength, but because he lacked direction. Frankl noticed 3 psychological profiles that survived longer than others. 1. The ones who loved someone, a wife, a husband, a child, a friend. Love kept them alive. Even Frankl survived by imagining his wife's face every night in the dark barrack. Even when he didn't know if she was alive, her memory became his why. He wrote, "Love is the ultimate meaning." 2. The ones with a mission. Some prisoners had work left to do, a book to finish, research to publish, a business to rebuild, a promise to fulfill, a dream to chase, a future self to become. These people fought harder because their story wasn't finished. Frankl himself told prisoners, live to tell the story, live to warn the world. This was a mission, and missions build endurance. 3. The ones who found meaning in suffering itself. This was the rarest group. These prisoners believed, if I survive this, I will grow, I will transform, I will rise as someone new. They didn't justify suffering, they used it. Modern psychology calls this post-traumatic growth. These survivors turned pain into purpose. Frankl saw a terrifying pattern. The moment a prisoner lost his meaning, his survival spiral began. It started with small behaviors. He stopped washing his face. He didn't tie his shoes. He stopped cleaning his bowl. He didn't get up when the guards yelled. He stopped fighting for better food. He slept through roll call. Frankl called this the existential vacuum. Once someone entered it, they often died within days, because the body follows the mind. When the mind says, "I have nothing left," the body shuts down. This was not philosophy. This was biology. Purpose is a survival mechanism. Frankl observed something beautiful. The strongest survivors had powerful inner worlds. They used imagination as a weapon. One man pretended he was teaching an imaginary classroom every night. Another mentally composed music he hoped to play after the war. Another recited poems from memory. These imaginative acts were not escapism. They were resistance. They were rebellion against reality. Frankl wrote, "Imagination was a sanctuary no guard could enter. The body was imprisoned, but the mind remained free." Survival wasn't only internal. It was also relational. Frankl saw that men who shared a piece of bread, a sip of soup, a kind word, a moment of warmth, a small joke, seemed to last longer. Not because kindness fed the body, but because kindness fed the soul. Psychologists today say that altruism reduces stress hormones, increases resilience, and strengthens the sense of purpose. Frankl witnessed this firsthand. A prisoner dying from starvation gave his last piece of bread to another man. Frankl said, "In that act, he proved the last freedom of man, to choose love, even when the world chooses cruelty." Frankl's own why became a combination of three things: love for his wife, his unfinished book, and his belief that his suffering would one day help others. Every day in the camp, he asked himself, "Who will I be after this?" This question pulled him through the darkest nights. It didn't erase suffering. It gave it direction. The camp taught Frankl a truth that reshapes our understanding of human life. Humans are not destroyed by suffering. They are destroyed by suffering that appears meaningless. The ones who survived didn't have easier conditions. They had deeper reasons. A why that turned pain into endurance. A purpose that turned despair into discipline. A meaning that turned suffering into survival. Frankl learned, give a person a why, and they can face almost any how. And that, my friend, is the foundation of everything this book teaches. Every human life, no matter how ordinary it looks on the outside, is powered by an invisible engine. A why, a reason, a purpose, a direction. Some people find it in love, some in creation, some in faith, some in ambition, some in responsibility. But in Auschwitz, where everything was stripped away, finding a why became more than philosophy. It became a survival strategy. Viktor Frankl realized that meaning was not something you think about, it was something you cling to with your entire being. Let's step deeper into how he discovered his own. There was a night when Frankl's hope nearly collapsed. He had been working all day in freezing temperatures, his fingers numb, his body trembling from starvation. He returned to the barrack and sat on the wooden plank, back against the wall, head bowed. Around him, prisoners slept like ghosts. Frankl whispered to himself, "I am losing the strength to continue." It was the most dangerous sentence a prisoner could speak, the beginning of the inner death. But then, something rose inside him. A memory, a face, a voice. His wife. He closed his eyes and imagined her standing beside him. He didn't know if she was alive. He didn't know if she ever would be. But he felt her presence as if she belonged to his soul, not the world. Frankl later wrote, "I saw my wife's face, and in that moment I understood the power of love. I realized that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which a man can aspire." His why returned. Love, not as romance, but as meaning. Another night, Frankl imagined something different. He pictured himself standing in a warm lecture hall years after the war. He imagined students listening carefully as he told them about the psychology of suffering, the discovery of meaning, and the human ability to survive the impossible. He could see the room, the chalkboard, the wooden seats, the sunlight filtering in. He imagined telling them, "This is what I learned from suffering." This was not delusion. It was future self-creation. Psychologists today call it episodic future thinking, imagining a vivid future to keep the present bearable. Frankl was doing it instinctively. He created a future worth surviving for. That lecture became his why. Before the war, Frankl had written a book about logotherapy, a new form of psychotherapy based on meaning. The Nazis confiscated it and destroyed it. But in the camp, Frankl began rewriting the book in his mind. Page by page, sentence by sentence, concept by concept. He would whisper the words to himself while digging trenches, while marching, while frozen in roll call. That book became his anchor, and he told himself, "If I survive, I will rewrite this book and give something to the world that came from this suffering." This idea pulled him through hell. His why was not just survival. It was creation. Frankl realized that meaning does not always come in grand visions. Sometimes it came in small, fragile moments. A prisoner sharing a joke to remind the group they were still human. A man giving away his last piece of bread because someone else needed it more. A worker noticing a sunset between the barbed wire and letting beauty enter him for just 1 second. A friend whispering, "Hold on, only one more day." Meaning didn't remove the suffering, but it made the suffering bearable. Because suffering with purpose is endurance. Suffering without purpose is despair. Inside the camp, Frankl began noticing 3 pathways to meaning that humans rely on. We will explore them fully later, but here we see the beginning. A face you hold in your mind, a memory, a belonging. Frankl said, Love goes beyond the physical presence. It becomes spiritual. A mission, a dream, a responsibility, a piece of work unfinished. This kept people alive when nothing else could. This is the hardest one. It means saying, if pain is unavoidable, then I must give it meaning. I must shape it into something valuable. This doesn't glorify suffering, it transforms it. One day, while marching through the snow with his back bent and his feet bleeding, Frankl looked up at the pale morning sky and felt something shift inside him. He realized the Nazis could control his schedule, his hunger, his clothes, his labor, but they could not control his inner world. That world belonged to him alone, and meaning lived in that inner world. He whispered to himself, I know now that the way a man accepts his fate gives him the chance to add a deeper meaning. That realization became his turning point. Frankl understood something that has echoed for decades in psychology, philosophy, and spirituality. You do not find meaning in life. You create it. You choose it. Meaning is not a treasure. Meaning is a direction. In the camp, meaning was the difference between waking up and giving up, between surviving and surrendering, between enduring and collapsing. And for Frankl, discovering his why was the first step towards outliving the darkness. Because meaning is not a luxury. Meaning is a lifeline. After months inside the camp, after watching men break, survive, surrender, rise, collapse, and sometimes transform, Viktor Frankl discovered something profound. Humans can find meaning in 3 different ways. Not by accident, not through luck, not because life gives it to them, but through choices. Even in a place designed to remove every choice, Frankl saw these 3 paths appear again and again. Let's walk through them quietly, one by one. The first source of meaning comes from creation, from the work you produce, the responsibilities you carry, the tasks only you can complete, the mark you leave behind. In the camp, Frankl saw prisoners who survived longer because they believed they had unfinished work. One man promised his daughter he would return to help her with her exams. Another man wanted to rebuild his small business so his employees wouldn't lose everything. Another was a violinist who dreamed of playing his favorite piece on a real stage again. And Frankl himself held on to one mission. I must rewrite my book. The world needs what I have learned. This wasn't arrogance. This was responsibility. It became a force stronger than pain. Today, psychologists agree. People with purpose-driven work live longer, recover faster, and suffer less. Because when your work has meaning, your pain has context. And pain with context is no longer pure suffering. It is sacrifice. Frankl realized, meaning comes from what you create and what you contribute to others. That is the first path. The second source of meaning is the most emotional. Love. Not romance. Not obsession. Not fantasy. Love as in deep human connection. Seeing another person fully and being fully seen. Frankl's greatest why was his wife. Every night, he imagined her face, the shape of her smile, the warmth in her eyes, the softness in her voice. He didn't know if she was alive, but he loved her as if she still existed inside his soul. He later wrote, "Love goes far beyond the physical presence. It finds its deepest meaning when the beloved is absent." That sentence hits differently, doesn't it? Because love is not only what we receive, it is what we remember, what we protect, what we carry, what we promise to honor. Frankl realized that in loving someone deeply, you become responsible for living well. Love kept him alive, and he saw love keep many prisoners alive. A father saying, "I must return to my child." A woman whispering her husband's name in her sleep. A friend sharing food even when starving. Love transformed a hopeless situation into a meaningful one. Love is meaning in its purest form. This is the hardest path, the most misunderstood, the most painful, and the most powerful. Meaning through suffering. This path says, if suffering is unavoidable, you must give it meaning. You must choose your inner response when you cannot change your outer reality. He learned this by watching a man dying slowly from malnutrition. Each morning, he whispered, "I will face today with dignity." Not strength, not joy, not hope, dignity. He died eventually, but he never surrendered his inner self. Frankl realized, when suffering has a purpose, it is no longer suffering. This does not mean we should seek pain. It means that when pain finds us, as it inevitably does, we can choose to make it meaningful. A breakup, a failure, a loss, a disappointment, a trauma. We can let it break us, or we can use it to become someone new. Frankl saw prisoners who grew spiritually even as their bodies weakened. He saw men forgive. He saw men comfort others. He saw men choose kindness when cruelty ruled the world. Suffering, he learned, is not the enemy. Meaninglessness is. Frankl's entire life philosophy emerged from these three sources. 1. What you create. Your work. Your contribution. 2. What you love. Your relationships. Your connections. 3. How you suffer. Your attitude towards pain. All three create meaning. And meaning is the one thing the Nazis couldn't take from him. Meaning was his rebellion, his freedom, his humanity. And these three paths are still the foundation of modern psychology today. Frankl wrote, "Man's main concern is not to gain pleasure or to avoid pain, but to see meaning in his life. Not comfort, not happiness, not success, meaning. Because when life is filled with meaning, you can face anything. Anything. Even Auschwitz. Even heartbreak. Even loss. Even failure. Even suffering. Meaning turns pain into growth. Turns emptiness into direction. Turns survival into purpose." Frankl learned, you do not choose your suffering, but you choose what it becomes. And that choice is the birth of meaning. My friend, freedom is a strange word when you think about it. We imagine freedom as wide open spaces, choices, opportunities, rights, mobility, options. But Viktor Frankl discovered something paradoxical. The truest freedom is not outside you, it's inside you. And Auschwitz, the place designed to crush every trace of freedom, is exactly where Frankl discovered this deeper, unshakable truth. Let's walk with him. In the camp, prisoners had no control over anything. Not when they slept, not when they woke, not what they ate, not where they worked, not how long they lived. Clothes were assigned, jobs were assigned, pain was assigned, death was assigned. A prisoner's entire life could be changed by a guard's single gesture, left or right. And yet, Frankl noticed something quietly powerful. Some prisoners remained free even when everything was taken from them. They walked differently, they spoke differently, they suffered differently. They held themselves with a dignity that didn't match the horrors around them. Frankl called this inner freedom, the one freedom no one can steal. Frankl discovered a truth that would become one of the greatest insights in all of modern psychology. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom. Think about that. Guards could decide how much food a prisoner ate, but they could not decide how he felt about that food. They could decide where he slept, but not what he dreamed about. They could decide how he worked, but not what he believed. They could decide to beat him, but not how he interpreted that suffering. That small, invisible gap between what happens and how we respond became the birthplace of Frankl's philosophy. Frankl watched moments where a prisoner had no physical strength left, and yet he chose to give away the last crumbs of his bread. He saw men who were freezing give their coat to someone older. He saw prisoners who healed others through a kind word when they themselves were starving. These men had no freedom outside themselves, but inside, they were sovereign. They were kings. They were more free than the guards. Frankl understood. Suffering reveals the strength of the inner world. One day, as Frankl struggled to carry a heavy beam, a guard approached him. Frankl tensed, expecting the usual blow. But instead, the guard leaned close and whispered, "I know you are suffering." Just 6 words. Not a rescue, not a gift, not a promise, just recognition. For a moment, Frankl felt human. He realized, even in cruelty, humans can choose compassion. And that choice comes from inner freedom. If a guard can choose kindness in a system built on brutality, then a prisoner can choose dignity in a world built on suffering. Frankl discovered that the most powerful freedom we have is the freedom to choose our attitude. You cannot control the weather, the past, other people, tragedy, suffering, what life throws at you, but you can control how you interpret it, how you respond, how you rise, how you endure, how you carry your pain, what meaning you give it. Frankl said, "They may have the power to make me suffer, but I decide whether that suffering destroys me." This was not toxic positivity. This was survival.
The mind became a sanctuary, a fortress, a place unbroken even when the body was. There was a moment Frankl never forgot. He was marching in deep snow, feet bleeding, body trembling, hands raw and cracked from cold. Around him, prisoners stumbled in silence. A guard yelled at them to walk faster. And suddenly, in the middle of all that suffering, Frankl felt a strange burst of clarity. He realized, they can hurt my body, but they cannot touch my mind unless I let them. He saw himself years in the future, standing in a university classroom, telling students what he learned from the camps. And in that moment, he felt free. Not physically, not socially, not politically, but spiritually, internally, existentially. He wrote, "In the moment of my suffering, I was more free than the guard who beat me. Because the guard was controlled by hatred and orders, Frankl was controlled by meaning." Frankl discovered what many people never learn in their entire lives. Freedom is not the absence of suffering. Freedom is the ability to choose who you become in the face of it. You can be trapped in a job, a situation, a trauma, a heartbreak, a failure, but still remain free on the inside, because your thoughts belong to you, your values belong to you, your attitude belong to you. Frankl lost everything: his home, his work, his identity, his family. And yet he found the last human freedom, the freedom to choose your inner world even when your outer world is collapsing. That freedom became his liberation long before the gates opened.
My friend, when we talk about freedom, we imagine celebration, open skies, tears of joy, a sudden rush of life returning all at once. But Viktor Frankl learned something that very few people ever understand. Liberation is not the end of suffering. It is the beginning of a new kind of struggle. Because after years of darkness, stepping into the light is blinding. Let's step into that moment with him. It was quiet. No dramatic announcement, no trumpets, no soldiers shouting, "No more orders!" Just a strange silence spreading across the camp. Frankl saw guards disappear one by one, dropping their uniforms and fleeing like ghosts. And then the gates opened. Prisoners stared at the open path to freedom. But none of them moved. They stood still, confused, frozen in place, because the mind could not process what the eyes were seeing. Frankl later wrote, "We could not grasp the reality of our release. Freedom appeared as a dream." Imagine suffering for years and then suddenly being told, you can walk away. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like free falling. When the prisoners finally stepped outside the camp, they walked like people who didn't trust the ground beneath them. Some bent down to touch the soil. They needed to feel that the world was real again. Frankl remembered walking through fields and seeing flowers. He had forgotten what flowers looked like. He knelt down, touched one gently, and cried. Not tears of joy, tears of disbelief. Tears of a man who no longer knows how to exist without fear. He wrote, "I dared not believe the freedom was real. I feared I would wake up again on the bunk of a barrack. Freedom felt fragile, breakable. Something unexpected happened after liberation. Many prisoners suddenly collapsed emotionally. Not in the camp, after the camp. Frankl saw men break down in tears over small things. A loud noise, a stranger's voice, a door slamming, a piece of bread. The simple act of being alive became overwhelming. Frankl understood. The mind holds its strength until the danger is gone. Then it lets go. This is what psychologists today call delayed emotional processing. When you're in survival mode, you cannot afford to feel. When survival ends, the feelings rush in like a flood. Happiness, grief, loneliness, shock, anger, confusion, all at once. Freedom is beautiful, but it is also devastating. Frankl returned to Vienna to look for his family. But the news was worse than his nightmares. His father had starved to death. His brother had been killed. His mother had been sent to the gas chambers. And his wife, the woman whose memory kept him alive every night, had died in Bergen-Belsen. He wrote, "There was nothing left to return to." Imagine surviving hell by clinging to love, only to discover that love has vanished. This was the deepest psychological blow he ever faced. Freedom tasted like ash. And he understood something terrifying and true. Pain does not end when suffering ends. Pain ends when meaning begins. Frankl saw many survivors become angry, violent, or bitter after liberation. Not because they were cruel, but because they didn't know what to do with their pain. Some felt hatred toward the world. Some felt betrayed by God. Some felt empty. Some felt guilty for surviving when others didn't. Survivor's guilt hit many of them like a storm. He wrote, "No one who returned found himself wholly unchanged." The trauma didn't stay in the camp. It followed them home. Recovery did not come in a grand moment. It came in tiny steps. Tasting warm food again, sleeping in a real bed, hearing birds, walking without orders, touching a tree, seeing a child laugh, reading a book, feeling the sun, trusting a stranger. These small human moments became therapy before therapy existed. Frankl slowly learned to live again, not through joy, but through meaning. Through work, through purpose, through helping others heal their wounds. He began to rebuild himself from the inside, not to erase the suffering, but to transform it. Liberation was not the end of Viktor Frankl's story. It was the beginning of his mission. A mission born out of pain, loss, grief, strength, and meaning. He discovered freedom is not simply the absence of chains. Freedom is becoming who you choose to be after the chains are gone. The suffering shaped him, but meaning rebuilt him. And this rebuilding led to everything he would teach the world. That life is not about what happens to you. Life is about what you do with what happens to you.
Many people break under suffering, but a rare few do something even more extraordinary. They study it, observe it, understand it, transform it into knowledge that helps millions. Viktor Frankl was one of those rare few. When he stepped out of Auschwitz, thin, hollow, grieving, carrying nothing but memory and loss, he didn't try to erase the experience. He tried to decode it. He wanted to understand, why do some people survive tragedy while others fall apart? Why does suffering destroy one person but strengthen another? Why does meaning, invisible, intangible meaning, decide who rises and who collapses? From these questions, a new psychology was born. A psychology shaped not in universities, but in camps. Not in theory, but in agony. Frankl called it logotherapy, the therapy of meaning. Let's step through its origins. Before the war, Frankl admired Freud and Adler, two giants of psychology. Freud believed humans are driven by pleasure, avoiding pain, seeking comfort. Adler believed humans are driven by power, achievement, status, superiority. But Frankl, after watching people endure starvation, slavery, humiliation, torture, death, grief, he realized humans are driven by the search for meaning, not pleasure, not power, meaning. Pleasure fails in suffering. Power dies in powerlessness, but meaning can survive anything. Frankl wrote, "Man is not destroyed by suffering. He is destroyed by suffering without meaning." That single insight redefined psychology forever. Freud asked, "What do you want from life?" Frankl flipped the question, "What is life demanding from you?" Meaning, he said, is not something you invent like a fantasy. Meaning is something you discover, like a hidden task life is quietly handing you. Every moment of your life asks you a question, and the way you respond is your meaning. Pain asks, "How will you endure me?" Love asks, "How will you protect me?" Loss asks, "How will you heal me?" Failure asks, "How will you rise again?" Frankl's entire psychology is built on one idea. Life gives you responsibilities, and in fulfilling them, you create meaning. Frankl identified three pathways, already touched earlier, but here, in logotherapy, he explains them fully. 1. Meaning through work. Doing something that matters. Creating, helping, serving, building, teaching, caring, completing a mission. Meaning grows whenever you contribute to someone or something beyond yourself. 2. Meaning through love. Not romantic love, human connection. Being deeply seen, seeing another deeply, caring, giving, belonging. Frankl says, love lets us see the essential traits of another person. Love helps us see possibilities in someone else that they themselves cannot see yet. 3. Meaning through suffering. When tragedy and pain are unavoidable, you can still choose your attitude. You can transform suffering into growth,
perspective, courage, wisdom, character. This is not glorifying pain. This is redeeming it. Meaning is not found in pain. Meaning is found in how you rise above it. After the war, Frankl returned to Vienna and began treating patients who felt their lives were empty, directionless, pointless. People who asked, "Why should I keep living?" Frankl didn't try to erase their pain. He helped them find meaning inside it. A depressed man who lost his wife was asked, "What love still lives inside you that she gave you?" A suicidal teenager was asked, "What responsibility do you have that no one else can fulfill?" A lonely woman was asked, "What contribution can your suffering inspire in others?" And people began transforming, because suffering without meaning is unbearable, but suffering with meaning is survivable. Frankl warned the world about a new psychological crisis, one that still defines our era: the existential vacuum. A life with no meaning, no direction, no belonging, no purpose. Frankl said most modern problems, addiction, anxiety, numbness, are not ills, but voids. Emptiness where meaning should be. He wrote, "When a person cannot find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." You've seen this, my friend. People lost in entertainment, people addicted to numbness, people drowning in distraction, people seeking dopamine instead of direction. Logotherapy is the antidote, not by giving people happiness, but by giving them purpose. Unlike other therapies that look backward, childhood, trauma, old memories, logotherapy looks forward, toward your tasks, your responsibilities, your potential, your values, your mission. Frankl believed life is not a quest for pleasure. Life is a quest for purpose. And in helping people find that purpose, he helped them heal. Meaning became medicine. Logotherapy was not built in an office. It was born in a barrack. It was shaped by hunger, fear, humiliation, death, grief, but also by love, strength, courage, faith, and hope. Frankl created a psychology that honors the human spirit even in its darkest hour. He learned, we are not free from suffering, but we are free to give suffering a purpose. And in that freedom, we become whole again. My friend, we have walked with Viktor Frankl through darkness, through hunger, through loss, through inner collapse, through survival, through liberation, and finally through rebirth. And now, after all the suffering, all the questions, and all the meaning he uncovered, Frankl asks us the question that sits at the heart of human existence. What is the meaning of life? You'd expect a grand statement, a universal answer, something carved in stone. But Frankl offers something far more subtle and infinitely deeper. Let's step into his final truth. Frankl says, the meaning of life is not a general formula. It is a question that life asks you every day, every hour. Life doesn't hand you meaning like a gift. Life demands meaning from you like a task. The meaning of today may be different from the meaning of tomorrow. The meaning of youth may be different from the meaning of old age. The meaning of joy may be different from the meaning of suffering. Life changes, so meaning changes. And that is not weakness. That is humanity.
Frankl makes a beautiful point. You don't discover meaning by asking, "What do I want from life?" You discover meaning by asking, "What does life want from me?" Your child needs you. Your work needs you. Your students need you. Your partner needs you. Your dream needs you. Your future self needs you. Your suffering needs you to transform it instead of letting it destroy you. Meaning is not abstract. Meaning is responsibility. It is the courage to respond to life's demands, even when those demands break your heart. We imagine meaning like a lightning strike, but Frankl says no. Meaning hides in small things: a conversation that comforts someone, a piece of work that improves the world, a moment of forgiveness, a moment of courage, a moment of beauty, a moment of love, a moment of endurance. Meaning is not always loud. Sometimes meaning is quiet, almost invisible, waiting for you to notice it. The difference between a meaningless day and a meaningful one is often a decision you make in the smallest moment. After the camps, Frankl rebuilt his life. He remarried, he taught, he wrote, he healed thousands, he traveled, he lived. But the suffering didn't vanish. He carried memories like shadows. He carried loss like scar tissue. And yet, he shaped those scars into purpose. He transformed trauma into teaching. He turned grief into service. He turned tragedy into guidance for generations. And in so doing, he proved meaning can redeem suffering, but suffering can also create meaning. Life does not undo pain. Life reshapes it. At the end of everything, Frankl leaves us with one message: you can always choose your meaning, even in darkness, even in loss, even in confusion, even in despair. Your why is your compass. It is your anchor, your fire, your lifeline, your identity, your direction. Frankl said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And that why is yours to choose. No one can choose it for you. No one can steal it from you. Meaning is the last human freedom and the deepest. My friend, Frankl teaches us that life is not about avoiding suffering. It is about transforming suffering into strength. It is not about seeking happiness. It is about seeking purpose. It is not about demanding from life. It is about responding to life. Meaning is not something distant. It is not something rare. It is something you create with your actions, with your love, with your courage, with your choices, with your resilience. Meaning is the story you choose to tell with your life. And the final question Frankl leaves us with is simple and profound. What meaning will you choose? And that's it for today, my friend. You were listening to Wise Alchemy, where books don't just tell stories, they transform us. The story ends here for now, but you and I will meet again. Thank you.